Michiyama, we're just still setting up a little bit. Just give me a few seconds. Okay, can somebody send me a message in the chat room just to let me know you can hear me good and you can see clearly? I just want to send out a couple of messages and then we'll get started. Okay, cool. You can hear me? Good. Alright, cool. I'm just sending out putting a couple of messages up and we'll get started real quick. I'm going to post the link to the article so people can well, I'm sorry, to the book so people can check it out as we're going along. All right. All right. So, Michiyamo Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akan and Neye Awusida Akanfo NANASOM da. That means greetings. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akan. Today is Akanfo NANASOM Day. Today is Awusida Sunday. Akanfo NANASOM Day. Ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion. We're going to do it a little bit different today because we're talking about specifically the text that we published recently. We just released a book. It's in PDF format, and we also just released the hardcover format that you can order directly from the website. We put a link up directly to odwirafo.com/nhoma.html. That's the link to where you can download the PDF. The PDF book, the ebook, is a free download, and then the softcover book, you can order that as well directly from that link on the website. You can download the ebook now, and we're going to go over the specifics, highlight the different sections of the book. So we're going to go, section by section, just to touch on the different aspects of, the information. And if you have any questions, you can post them at any time in the chat. You can post them now, and as we're going along, if you had any questions previously that you were trying to get answered, you just post them in the chat, and then we'll go step by step and capture them. So first, this is actually the hard copy, the soft cover version of the text, the Okra complex, the soul of Akanfo. So I'll be going through this, and you can go through it now. Now first, does anybody have any questions from the text or from any previous broadcast? Just post the questions in the forum. And as we go through what we're doing here, we're going to start off. We're just going to highlight the basic sections, and then we're going to get into some detailed information. Some of the information in the book, specifically regarding the cosmology, dealing with Amen, Amenet, Ka and Kait, Hehu and Hehut, and Nu and Nut. We've gone over that a number of times in the different broadcast dealing with the Abosom. So we're not going to go spend too much time on that aspect of it. We'll highlight it, but we will touch on it, and then we'll go forward. So first, open up to the very beginning. We talk about Akan people, and we talk about the Okra and the Okraa or Okraa, and we talk about Akan people coming primarily from Ivory Coast, primarily in Ghana, Ivory Coast. We talk about a little bit about the true story of the migrations of Akan people from ancient Kemet. Hold on one second. Okay, we talk about the true story of our migrations from ancient Khanit and Kamit, meaning ancient Nubia and Egypt, across West Afuraitkaitnit to the regions of first the ancient Ghana Empire or the Akana Empire, and then we talk about our further migrations into the regions of Ghana and Ivory Coast, contemporary Ghana and Ivory Coast today. And we're about, Akan people make up about 49%, or about 45% of the population of Ghana, and about 42% of the population of Ivory Coast. So collectively, there are about 20 million Akan people in Afuraitkaitnit, and of course, they're one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent. And because of that, it's always been the case. So when the enslavement process, the Muswa Kesie, the great perversity, the enslavement process and enslavement era began, Akanfo, there were a large percentage of Akan people taken from West Afuraitkaitnit and forcibly transported to North Central South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. So that's why there's a strong Akan presence, and people are drawn to Akanfo NANASOM because it's an ancestral mandate. Many of us are Akanfo, and we're reclaiming our culture. It's no different than Yoruba people or people who practice Vodou, Eve and Fon and Mina people. People who learn that they're Igbo and different things. We're connected. We have an ancestral memory of having lived in Afuraitkaitnit, participating in our ancestral group, and we're naturally drawn to that. So we kind of touch on that as far as an introduction, and then we get into some of the linguistics. Let me see, does anybody have any? Okay, no questions yet. All right, so that next page we talk about the Ka and the Okraa, and we show the connection between those two terms in ancient Kemet and ancient Khanit, and then in Akan culture. And then we start showing the positioning of the Ka on the head. So let's talk a little bit about that. First, with regard to the name, the function. Ka, and then you have Kait or Kait. Ka is the male term for soul in ancient Khanit and Kamit, and Kait is the female term for the soul, the divine consciousness. In Akan, Ka becomes Kra, and often pronounced Okraa. The sometimes in the beginning signifies that what we're talking about is a noun, and sometimes when the O is dropped, then the term becomes a verb. For example, you have Kra, which is the soul, or Okraa, meaning the soul, but Kra as a verb means to take leave. Or you have Kon, Akan, which means a fight or a battle. When you drop the O and just from Akan and you just say Kon, it goes from a noun, Akan, fight or battle, to Kon, to fight or to battle. So when you drop the O or the off sound, it transforms from a noun to a verb. And it's the same thing with regard to the Ka or the Kra or the Kara in Akan. Kara or Okraa means soul, divine consciousness. When that O is dropped, sometimes that noun becomes a verb, Kara, which means to take leave. And that's directly related to the notion of the Kra with regard to our cosmology. So first we're going to show very quickly again how the Ka fits into the divine scheme, and then how it's directly related to us spiritually on an individual level and us collectively. So the great being in ancient Khanit and Kamit, ancient Nubia and Egypt, the male is Amen, sometimes called Amen Ra. The female is Amenet, sometimes called Amenet Raet. Together, Amen and Amenet function together as one divine unit, the Supreme Being. Two individual entities, conscious living entities, Amen and Amenet, as the Great Father and the Great Mother are the Great Being, the Great Supreme Being. Conscious, living, functioning beings that fuse together and function as one divine unit, just like a male and female have to fuse as two halves of a whole to function as a unit in order to produce a child. The Supreme Being is not, as we said in our previous broadcast, just a hierarchy of abstract energy like electricity or electromagnetic energy that we use to draw from and manipulate, like air in the atmosphere, or electricity or electromagnetic energy streaming from the sun, or the gravity, coming from the thermodynamics of the Earth Mother. It's not just abstract energy that we pull from. Amen and Amenet, called Nyame and Nyamewa and Akan, the Great Father and the Great Mother, the Supreme Being, are conscious living entities. They are the Great Being. We are simply cells within the great divine body of Amen and Amenet. To give an example, if you know your cells in your body are conscious, they are living entities. Your sperm cells are living. If you're a male, the ovum or ova are living cells. A sperm cell is born, grows, develops, matures, swims, finds the egg. It's a living entity. They live and they die. There's a spiritual force that animates the cell. The same thing with the ova. They are living cells. They're birthed, they develop, they nourish themselves, they have functions as they execute, and then they die, they perish. Imagine if the two cells in the body were communicating with one another, and for example, two liver cells, which are living cells, and they were told that there's no such thing as a great body within which they dwell. No larger being that they dwell in. They just live in and of themselves and for themselves, and the notion of a greater being that they live within is just mythology, and it's just a function of somebody anthropomorphizing their consciousness, and in reality, the great being is really within them, and there's no such thing as a human being that they are simply a microscopic part of. That's the idiocy that we promote, which comes from the whites and their offspring, when we attempt to put forth the false notion that the Supreme Being really doesn't exist. It's all within inside of us. That comes from the whites and their offspring. They don't want us to communicate with Nyamewa Nyame, with Amenet, with Amen, because if we do that, we connect with our Kra, we connect with divine order, which we will deal with in detail, Nyamewa Nyame and Sheshe, or the arrangement in Sheshe of Nyamewa Nyame, which is composed of acceptance and rejection, divine law and divine hate, the acceptance of order and the rejection or the repulsion or the destruction of disorder. If we embrace divine order, then we embrace divine law, and we also embrace divine hate, and then we begin to accept those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we need in order to function harmoniously in the world. And then we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we don't need in order to function harmoniously in the world, those things that would create obstacles to our proper functioning in the world. Of course, the whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder, so if we engage in orderly behavior, we automatically have nothing but divine hate or rejection for these spirits of disorder. They are not part of the natural part of the divine body, just like cancerous cells in your body are not naturally a part of the body. They degenerate from normal healthy cells and become disfigured, and then their disfigurement manifests in a disfigured behavior and orientation. Then they begin to proliferate when they can and attack the other cells within the body. If their development is not arrested, then of course they will take over the body and kill the organism. So what your body's response is, the immune response, is to destroy the cancerous cells and expel them from the body to maintain the integrity of the whole. And of course we've touched on that before. So it's the same thing with the whites and their offspring. They are cancerous cells in this great divine body. They have a temporary existence. They were not mandated to come into being. They have no divine function in the world, and we're going to get into Nkrabi and Nkra. So just like cancerous cells coming into being and they are slated for destruction, when we as healthy, normal cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being embrace that nsheshe, that natural order, then we embrace those things that we need to harmonize with order, law, and we reject and destroy those things that create disorder. And that's the function of divine hate. The whites and their offspring would like to continue to proliferate, destroy the healthy cells, and take over the organism to the extent that they can. So of course, through the perversion of religion, they have to teach there is no supreme being, or they are the representatives of a false supreme being that they manufacture, or attempt to tell us that there is no supreme being and we need to just focus inward. There are no forces in nature that we can connect with. They would like us to cut ourselves off from our own power source. It's like somebody telling you don't need nutrients, you don't need vitamins, minerals from natural foods. All you need to do is just breathe and maybe drink a little bit of water, and that's all you need. You don't need anything else. And as you are wasting away, they're controlling your environment. We have to wake up from that. So when we talk about Amen, Amenet, Ka and Kait, Hehu and Hehu, Nu and Nu, the primordial 8 divinities that give birth to Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. We went into that whole process in a couple of videos, but when we talk about Ka and Kait, that's critical because Amen and Amenet are the great being. Just like, again, like the Afurakani male, Afuraitkaitnit female are 2 beings, male and female, who unite to harmonize as one unit to create. Amen and Amenet are the great being who unite in harmony to create the universe. They give birth first to their consciousness, 2 entities, Ka and Kait. The Ka and Kait are the consciousness or soul of the Supreme Being. They manifest as the black substance of space. That is a plasma. It is an entity, has male and female aspects, Ka and Kait, which we call Kra and Okraa or Okraa in Akan, the great divine soul. The black substance of space is called dark energy or dark matter. It is expansive. It makes up over 99% of the known universe. All the stars, suns, moons, earths, planetary bodies, celestial bodies exist within this black substance. It contains all things. It's very similar to when you go to sleep or you meditate and you close your eyes and there's an expansive blackness. You can employ your consciousness to generate forms, thoughts, ideas, colorful images, all kinds of developments within that black substance. You can employ your consciousness to do that. You can employ your consciousness to shut those images down. You can create whatever you want to, whatever you desire to in that space. That's because that space is a small drop of the consciousness of the Supreme Being. They first gave birth to Ka and Kait, their capacity to create, to generate consciousness, intelligence, and they employed those forces to give birth to eventually to all of the Abosom, the forces in nature, which will later give birth to the stars, suns, moons, planets, and those entities would give birth physically to us, and our spirits would be sent into those physical vehicles. So the Ka and Kait and Akan are called Kra and Okraa. So, well, first let's we're going to go to the next section. We just wanted to go through that very quickly so we can get on to the other information. Okay, we had a question. How does Geb fit in with the earth, or with the to earth mothers, Asase Afua and Asase Ya? So if you look in the Afuraitkaitnit, the origin of the term Africa, part 3, we go into the different layers of earth. We talk about Ptah as well as Segmet at the inner core of earth, and then we talk about Shu and Tafnut, Geb and Nut, Alsar, Alset, Set, and Nebet-Het. And when you talk about Geb, you're talking about the crust portion of the earth. And when you're talking about Ptah, we're talking about the innermost core, where the iron crystal is. And then from layer to layer, you're dealing with Shu, Tafnut, Geb, and Nut. And then Alsar, of course, is a black soil substance. Set is the red land, Desheru, which is, of course, the desert land as well as the red clay. Aset is connected to the river waters. Nebuchadnezzar is connected to the rain waters of earth. But Geb is dealing with the crust of the earth. Asase Afu and Asase Ya are the planetary being itself, and deep within, dealing with the mantle. There's a lower mantle and an upper mantle. You'll find, in the inner core, you'll find that Asase Afu and Asase Ya are in that region, but they're dealing with the entire planet itself. Okay? Okay, and you had something about, do you know any symbol? Anything about the French lily flower, the New Orleans saint symbol? I haven't really checked that out. Just thinking about it and imaging it, it looks like the Nekeb plant, the plant of the south, dealing with ancient Kemet. So you have the plant of the north, the northern lotus, and then you have the Nekeb plant of the south, and it actually does, well, at least the top portion does look like that. I don't know what their reasoning was behind utilizing that. Okay, and then you asked, are we going to do something with regard to diet? Yeah, we will do something like that in the future. We do have some of that information on our Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com site. And before we go forward, let me put that out there just so people who don't have that information, they can get it. Okay, so that's the Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com site. It's a network that you can join, and we have forums, discussions. We post articles, post videos, and a number of different things. That's a network that we own. So there is some information about holistic diet. Like, for example, we have a section on there we talk about often green superfoods, but there's also such thing as black foods, and black foods are superfoods as well. In some cases, they're more nutritious than the green foods. So we often, people who deal with holistic health, people who are vegans, vegetarians, or just interested in holistic health, we always hear about the green foods like spirulina or wheatgrass and things like that. But there's also the black superfoods. And when you look at Osar Awusi, you'll see that he's shown with black skin, but then he's also shown with green skin. So we show a connection between those green superfoods, dealing with fertility and regeneration, photosynthesis and things like that. And then we also show the connection to Awusi and the black superfoods like black rice, black olives, black quinoa, a number of different black superfoods, and their connection with power and nourishment and stability and so forth. So let's get back to, but we will be doing some more information dealing with specifically with diet. Okay, so we just kind of went very quickly through dealing with Amen and Amenet, focusing on the fact that they gave birth first to their Ka and Kait, their divine consciousness and intelligence, and then employed that consciousness and intelligence to generate forms, thoughts, ideas, which would eventually be given energy and then given a physical form that would become Abode, the created universe. But we stopped at Ka and Kait because that's the focus of this. So in the book, in the text, of course, we go into detail talking about Amen, Amenet, Ka, Kait, Hehu and Hehu, Nu and Nut, and the birth of Ra and Ra'et. So you have those details, but here we just want to move forward quickly. Okay, first we're gonna talk a little bit about the Kra and the cosmology associated with the Kra, and then we'll talk about there's a section called race and the Okraa. So before an Akan person is born, or just Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person, people are born. When you look across the board in Afuraitkait, the same basic notion, the same basic cosmology you will find dealing with the soul. In Akan it's called Kra and Okraa. In Yoruba it's called the Ori Inu. In Vodoun it's called the Se Lido. In Igbo it's called the Chi. So they're all talking about the divine consciousness. It is an entity It is a personal Abosom, a divinity, a force in nature, a spiritual force in nature, a power. So the deities, you have Amen and Amenet, Nyamewa, Nyame and Akan, the great supreme being. They give birth to the divine spirit forces in nature, the spiritual forces that animate the suns, the moons, the planetary bodies, and even within our planetary body, the spirits that animate the ocean, animate mountains, animate certain rivers, animate different aspects of the geological structure of the earth, whether it's the innermost cores, we were talking about the lower and upper mantle, the crust, the black soil substance of earth, the different aspects of the atmosphere, and so forth, fire, gravity, different things. So the spirits, the Abosom, as we call them in Akan, the Ntorou, Ntorotu, as called in ancient Kemet, often people pronounce it as Neteru or Ntorou, but in Akan we say Ntorou as the male divinity, Ntorot, or Ntong as the female divinity. That's just another way of saying Abosom. We do have an article showing that the term Abosom comes directly from Kemet, and the terms Ntorou, often people saying Neter, or Ntorot, often we say Ntong and Akan. Those terms can be found in ancient Kemet, and they can also be found in the Akan language, from NTR or NTRT, Ntorou, we pronounce it Ntorow in Akan. Ntorot, we pronounce Ntorou or Ntong in Akan. The same meanings, the patrilineal Abosom, the patrilineal deity, and the matrilineal divinity, coming from the mother side and the father side. So the forces of nature in Akan, typically we call them Abosom. Abosom singular, Abosom plural. In the Yoruba tradition, they're called the Orisha, sometimes the Irumole. In Vodoun, they are called the Vodou, the forces in nature. In Igbo, they are called the Arusi, the forces in nature, the divine spirit forces animating different aspects of creation. In the Dogon tradition, they're called some of them are called the nhoma. So these are the divine spirit forces in nature. Conscious, living, reasoning entities, major forces. Just as you are a spirit that animates a physical body, you're conscious, you're living, you're reasoning, you make decisions, you execute behaviors. The forces in nature are conscious, living, reasoning spirits that animate physical bodies. Again, it's the whites and offspring who attempt to teach us that there are no such thing as deities. When they invaded ancient Kamit, ancient Khanit, the ancient centers of civilization in southern Europe and the so-called Middle East and Western Asia and Eastern Asia and southern China and so forth, we populated these areas before the whites and their offspring came into being. When a small percentage of our people who engaged in disorder were drawn up, exiled from the larger group or escaped from the larger group, and were drawn up into northern Eurasia, and after the end of the last ice age, after losing their abatum, their melanin, and their normal facial characteristics, and developed a perverse morphology, as well as extra vitiligo, extra albino characteristics, these newly degenerated mutant beings called the whites and their offspring began to attack the different civilizations in the southern Europe, the so-called Middle East, Western Asia, and further into Asia, and then of course into North Afuraitkaitnit. For thousands of years, going back over 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, up until this very moment, they have constantly attacked wherever we have established civilization. For the first few thousand years, they were very unsuccessful. So what they would attempt to do after thousands of years of being generally unsuccessful is they started to attempt to infect the religious practices. Now, of course, we practice ancestral religion for years, for millennia. The whites and their offspring do not have a religion because they have no connection to the Abosom. So we didn't fall for their infections. What they would do is they would wait until certain groups of Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit were at war with one another. That's whether it was in ancient Kemet, southern Europe, that even went on for thousands of years later until we migrated into the western part of the continent, They will wait for us to engage in conflict and support one side against the other side and play both sides off against one another. They will look for the disgruntled in society who are ready to exile themselves from society or separate or secede from the larger nation, and they will connect with them and try to introduce perverse concepts to those individuals. And sometimes those individuals would embrace those concepts temporarily in order to connect and ally themselves with the whites and their offspring in order to make a united front against their traditional so-called enemies or rivals. But through the chaos, the confusion, generations, some people would pick up on the lustful, pseudo-perverse culture of the whites and their offspring and begin to perpetuate that. So that's how incrementally, over thousands of years, these perverse religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, which are just perverted fragments of the actual tradition from ancient Kemet, that's how they morphed into these perverse, false religions. Through that practice, they decided, first, they tried to make the divinities of ancient Kemet white. So when the Greeks and then the Romans took up residence in Kemet after invading and taking over northern Kemet, and many of our people defected and moved south and west and to the central part of the continent, the first thing they did was to begin to depict the actual Abosom, the forces of nature, as white. So all the various black gods and goddesses, the Abosom, they started creating white images, white sculptures, white paintings. You will see the influence of the whites and their offspring when you see the Greek Ptolemies and then later the Roman rulers in the northern part of Kemet. You will see that Osar, Oset, Heru, and so forth. You start seeing, of course, they pervert the names into Osiris, Isis, Horus, Helios for Ra, Hephaestus for Ptah, all these, a number of different perversions, but then you see they begin to depict them with the features of the whites and their offspring, and they began to get away from depicting them as originally as they are, as they manifested or possess or manifested to us, and the only way they manifest in the human sphere as black. They began to depict them as whites, and they basically wanted us to worship them. They wanted us to worship their image. Later on in the West, dealing with Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they decided to incrementally get rid of the whole notion of deities, so that we will believe there is no such thing as deities, and the only thing we could focus on ritually or spiritually is their fake deity, and then the whites and their offspring, of course, are the mouthpieces for the fake deity on earth, so we would have to listen to them. And if we were to listen to anything else, whether it's the ancestral spirits or the Abosom, who are actually connected to us and govern creation, we're not supposed to listen to anything but the whites and their offspring. So that's the reason why they push this notion that the deities are not real, the deities don't exist, the deities just represent different parts of nature, they're just a hierarchy of energies that we just draw from. All of that foolishness comes directly from the whites and their offspring because they have no connection and they understand that that's our power source. If we connect with our Nsamanfo, our Abosom, our Kra, our Krawa, then we won't listen to the whites and their offspring. We will be guided divinely by our own Kra, our own soul, our own divine consciousness. We will therefore embrace divine order. Inyamewa, Inyame, and Sheshe. We will embrace divine law and incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we need to harmonize every thought, intention, and action with divine order. And we will also embrace divine hate, which means we will reject all of those things, objects, deeds, or entities that bring disorder into the world. We will accept order and reject disorder and its purveyors. That means their extermination. So they can't afford that if their entire desire is to consume and control and destroy our population and control whatever resources they can while they continue their temporary existence on the planet. So let's deal with the origins of how the whites and their offspring exist as they do when we talk about race and Okra. So when a person is before a person is born, well, let's put it this way: when you're alive and then you make your transition and you die, your spirit separates from your body. We call the spirit the Sun Sun. So the Sun Sun separates from from the body. Now, for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we are in the spirit realm. We connect with our living relatives during the funeral, afterwards, and so forth. Typically in our Akan culture, discarnate spirit, after making their transition, will spend time around the family members and so forth for about 40 days, and then they start to make their transition to the ancestral realm to dwell in Asamando with the other NANASOM and Samanfo and Asamanfo Pa, the other ancestresses and ancestors of Afuraitkai. Only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black ancestresses and ancestors exist in Asamando, and those are the only ones that we connect with because they are our only true family. Now, we make our transition to the spirit realm. We dwell in the spirit realm amongst the Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors, for a certain period of time, maybe 100 years, maybe 150, maybe 200 years and so forth, but at some point, there's a point for us to reincarnate and be drawn back into the world through one of our descendants, one of our maybe great granddaughters. But before we are drawn into her womb to reincarnate as a Sum into her womb, we are drawn up to Inyame wa Inyame. We are given our Kra or Okraa if you're a female, Okraa if you're a male, which is the Ka and the Kait. And encoded within the Ka or the Kra is the Nkraa and the Nkrabia, our divine function we are to execute in the world. And we're also given the She and the Shebia, our force of compulsion that we use to employ our spiritual energy to make that function happen. We're given that in the Okraa. It's connected to us, so we are a spirit. We go before Inyame wa Inyame. They assign or give us a portion of their divine consciousness, a little drop of divine consciousness from the ocean of divine consciousness, which is the soul, the Ka and Kait, or the Okraa, or the Okrawa of Inyame wa Inyame. They give us a little drop of their soul as a divine entity, a deity, an Abosom, a Vodou. It's a conscious entity that dwells with us. The reason why we can call our soul or our Kra ours is because it is assigned to us, but it is an entity. Just like you have a physical body, and then you have a smaller body within your physical body, which is the brain, and the brain regulates the functions of the various organs and systems in the body. You have a spirit body, a Sum, and within your spirit body is placed another spiritual entity, which is your Kra, which is your soul. It regulates the functions of the different aspects of your spirit. It is an entity that dwells within you. It was given to you by Inyame wa Inyame. It is an entity, a conscious living entity. It is your personal Abosom. It is Abosom, just like other Abosom, like Asar, Aset, Heru, the different Abosom. Your Kra is an Abosom. We worship the Kra, we communicate with the Okraa, we are guided by the Okraa. That's the crux of spirituality. It is a portion of the Supreme Being's consciousness. Encoded within it is what we need to execute in the world and the specific configuration of spiritual forces that we have been given to support our function in the world is all encoded with that in that entity, and it's given to us. So now we've gone before Inyame wa Inyame as a spirit, as a Sum. We're giving us as a spirit body, and now our spirit body, our Sum, called Sahu and Kamit, is given a spiritual brain, which is the Okraa. Now you have a body and a brain. Now you're a whole entity. And now that you're a body with a brain, a Sum with a Kra, a spirit with a soul, with a divine force, a deity connected to your head, now you can be sent back as a whole entity into Asamando, the spirit realm, and await incarnation. And at some point, one of your descendants will connect with their spouse, and through copulation, they will generate the energy that draws your spirit from Asamando in the spirit realm into the womb of the female, and you will begin to gestate through that zygote, through that place of residence, that embryo, and 40 weeks or so later, you will be born into the world. You will have a physical body animated by a sunsum, a spirit, and within that sunsum is your Kra, which is governed by Abosom as well. But your Kra itself is an Abosom. So that's how it typically happens. After we're as a spirit before Nyame wa Nyame, and we're given an Akra, given a soul, and we're given our function, the Nkra and the Nkrabia, our function to execute in the world and the manner in which we must execute that function. For example, if our function in the world, just like your cells, every cell has a specific function and is designed to execute that specific function. So immune system cells have a specific function. They're designed to execute immune functions within the body. Your circulatory system, the organs and structures within that system have a specific function to send blood throughout the body and receive blood within the body, carry nutrients. The blood carries nutrients and oxygen and so forth. That's the circulatory system's major function. We have a specific function to execute in the world. Maybe your function as an Afurakani or Afuraitkaitnit person in the world is to be a healer, to heal just like certain cells in your body can repair damage within the body. Maybe that's your function within the great divine body, is to be a healer. So you have a specific function, but there's a manner in which you must execute that function, and then you're also sent through a specific blood circle that has certain characteristics as well, and that colors the manner in which you're going to operate in the world. So you're given a function and a manner in which to execute that function. If you're supposed to be a healer or a healeress, then that's your function, but you're given a manner in which to execute that function. Then you're also supplied with energy, a specific configuration of spiritual power, so that you can actually execute the function properly. So you're given that and a manner in which to use that power so that you can use that energy to execute your function but not create disorder in yourself and in Abade, the created universe, in the process. So you can't just be given a function with no power to execute. And if you're given the power to execute, you can't just be given the power freely and you can just use it for any reason. If you misuse the power that you're given by Nyame wa Nyame, then that power will be shut down. And then you'll just be operating on just the loose electromagnetic energy that moves throughout the earth and is connected with the sun and so forth, but it has no divine component operating through it when the Abosom withdraw. If you're engaged in disorder, you repel the Abosom. So again, when a person makes that transition, the sunsum leaves the body, they go to the ancestral realm at some point. This is Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. At some point it's time to reincarnate. They are drawn up to Nyame wa Nyame, given a Okra, given a soul, assigned a personal Abosom that dwells with us at all times, just like your physical brain dwells within your body and regulates your body at all times. And within that Kra, you're given your function and your specific energy complex that you use to execute that function. And once you have that spiritual brain, you have your soul connected to your sunsum, you're sent back into the spirit realm by Nyame wa Nyame to await incarnation. When you leave Nyame wa Nyame, the term for to take leave in Akan, the verb is kra, meaning to take leave. So just like kra meaning soul, kra means to take leave. In ancient Kamit, Ka means soul, but another definition of Ka means to leave or to take leave. Why does Ka mean soul and Ka also mean to take leave in ancient Kemet, and Kra means soul and Kra means to take leave in Akan? Of course, we are the same people, we just migrated from the east to the west, so that's why the terms are identical, but cosmologically they're identical as well. And it's directly related to the fact that once you are given your function to execute in the world, your Nkra, then you leave Nyame wa Nyame with a divine function, and you're sent into the world. So you take leave. You take leave, you Kra, or you leave after you're given your Okra by Nyame wa Nyame, then you Kra from Nyame wa Nyame, you take leave and you go into the ancestral realm, and then you eventually incarnate into the world. when Akan people, if we are visiting somebody and then it's time for us to leave, we say typically makrawo, which means ma or me, I, kra, leave, and wo means you. So makrawo means I leave you. And we say the same thing with regard to nyame wa nyame. We're given our divine function, and then we take leave. We're given a message, mission to carry out into the universe, and then we take leave, kra, after receiving our okra. And then we come into the world. We're given a name that's associated with the kra, because the parents engage in ritual practice to learn about what the function of the child is. In our Akan culture, we have an indication of that just by virtue of the day that the child is born, and we receive a kradin or a soul name and so forth, and we'll get into that. And the child is given a name by the parents that creates a certain specific configuration of sound vibrations that stimulates the person's sum to align with the kra every time they hear the name and every time they speak the name. It has that effect. It's a formula. The name is a formula to stimulate your spirit, your sum, to align or realign with your okra every time you think it, every time you hear it, every time you speak it, every time you see it. So that's how it is for us. One of the reasons why people leave offerings for people who make their transition. In our Akan culture, for example, somebody makes their transition, they know the ancestral spirit is going to be around the family members during the funeral and afterwards and at different times for at least around a 40-day period. So they set up a specific shrine and komre for the ancestral spirit, and they put offerings out, food out, and they want to give messages because they know that the ancestral spirit, this kind of spirit now, is going to kra or take leave from them from the physical world, and they're going to go to Asamando, the spirit realm. So they want them to carry the messages, their prayers, our prayers. We want that spirit to go to the NANASOM and Samafo and Asamafo Pa, our ancestresses and ancestors, because we know they're going there to give them certain messages. But we also want to give them messages to carry to the Supreme Being. So when the spirit leaves Earth, goes to the ancestral realm, just like before incarnation, they have to go to Inyame wa Inyame and receive a kra, receive a function, receive a certain configuration of energy, and then they're sent into the spirit realm to await incarnation. But once we die and transition, and we leave the earth and we go to the ancestral realm, before we can settle in the ancestral realm, first we must go back to Inyame wa Inyame, and our Okra, our personal Abosom that dwells with us, and has dwelled with us all of our lives and taken account of everything we've done, gives a report to Inyame wa Inyame about how we lived our lives. And then we are basically judged on the scales of Ma'at as it's symbolized in ancient Kamit to determine what aspect of the spirit realm we will dwell in. Will we dwell with the NANASOM and Samafo or Asamafo Pa? Will we be on the lower level of the spirit realm, or even will we just be discarnate, wayward earthbound spirits because we were engaged in disorder for a large amount of the time that we were living on earth? So just like we go to Inyame wa Inyame first to get our function, to get our kra, when we're sent into the world, we take leave from Inyame wa Inyame, we kra from Inyame wa Inyame. Well, after we make our transition, we have to go to Inyame wa Inyame first, and our kra gives a report to see how do we live our lives. So that taking leave process, we take leave from the Supreme Being, but we also take leave when we transition from our earthly counterparts, and they know that we're going to Inyame wa Inyame. So they give offerings, they want to give messages, they want to send prayers of provocation so that they can harmonize their thoughts, intentions, and actions as a collective, as a community, as an Almighty, as a nation, with Inyame wa Inyame and Sheshe, divine order. So we're always seeking to align or realign ourselves with divine order. So when we give offerings to the deceased spirit, we know that spirit is going to the Nsamafo. We want to harmonize with them, and if they have any messages for us that we have missed or we've been distracted from, they will give those messages again, stronger in different ways. When the spirit goes to Inyame wa Inyame, we would like that spirit to provoke the energy and consciousness of Inyamewa Inyame on our behalf, so that we can realign ourselves, every thought, intention, and action as a collective with Inyamewa Inyame. If we missed anything from what Inyamewa Inyame has been trying to direct us to do, then that spirit will assist in that process. So that's spiritual development, not just on a physical, individual level, but on a collective level. In Akan culture, we set up shrines for the deceased in that fashion. In ancient Kamit, they had temples, temple enclosures, certain niches within temples that they would call the Het Ka, or the house of the Ka. And they also had Hem Ka, or priests and priestesses of the Ka, because the Ka is a specific entity. It's an Abosom, and when that spirit is going to make its, when the person dies and the spirit eventually is going to move and go to Inyamewa Inyame, the community would like messages to be carried to the spirit realm, to the other Abosom, to the Nsamafo, Inyamewa Inyame, and so forth. Now that's what happens with our people. We make our transition, go to the ancestral realm, go to Inyamewa Inyame, get on our Kraa, come back to the ancestral realm and reincarnate. The whites and their offspring, when they die, they have no Kraa, they have no Okrawa. That's the difference between the whites and their offspring and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. All white Asians, white Europeans, white Americans, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Arabs, white Hindus, non-black people worldwide. The difference between us is that we have an Okraa, we have a divine function, we have a soul, a divine entity that dwells within us, and they don't have that. They're like a physical body without a brain. They are spirit bodies without a Kraa, without a divine consciousness, without a soul, without a Ka, without a Kait. And they also don't have a Ba and Bayat either, which is a conscious living spirit, and we'll talk about that as well. So when they make their transition, their spirit leaves their body, they go to a lower level of the spirit realm, often earthbound spirits that hang around the place where they died, quote unquote haunt houses, or the corner they were shot at, or where where the car crashed and where they died, or they moved to a certain area earthbound where their other departed relatives are. They create disturbances in the spirit, from the spirit realm, from the lower level of the spirit realm, and so forth. They remain on that level until one of their descendants begins to copulate, and they're drawn back into the womb, and they're reborn 40 weeks later as a Achiwadifo, a spirit of disorder, a child, one of the whites in their offspring, back in the world again. They go from the physical world to the lower level of the spirit world, earthbound, and right back to the physical world through reincarnation. We make our transition, our spirits go from the physical world to the spirit realm. Then we go up to Inyamewa Inyame, the realm of the Supreme Being and the Abosom. We're given a divine function. We're assigned Abosom, not just for the Kraa, but we also patrilineal and matrilineal inherited Abosom that are associated with us. We're all connected in that manner. Then we're sent back into the physical realm, to the spirit realm, the ancestral realm, to await incarnation. And then we incarnate as spirits with souls, with a divine function, and so forth. So that's the crux of it. We talked about physiologically, when the whites and their offspring moved into northern Eurasia, they were engaged in incest, dissexuality, homosexuality, that insane, perverse activity that defines who they are. They go against the divine creative force in creation and attempt to use that force for perversity, and that defines who they are, that repel their Kraa, Okrawa. When you repel your Okraa and it's disconnected from you because you engage in disorder, you can repel your Kraa. And when you repel your Kraa, if you don't do anything to realign yourself with your Kraa, eventually your Okraa itself will go to Inyamewa Inyame. Just like normally when you die and you reconnect with Inyamewa Inyame, well, if you repel your Kraa, if you're engaged in disorder, it's no different than taking two magnets with the same polarities and putting them near each other. They will repel. The Abosom, the forces in nature, the Orisha, the Ntoroou, Ntortu, they are embodiments of divine order in creation. If you engage in disorder, you will repel yourself, you will be repulsive to the Abosom, the forces in nature. You will be repulsive to your NANASOM and Samanfo, your cultivated ancestors and ancestors. Even within your own community, if you engage in disorder, causing disorder all the time, you make yourself repulsive to your family members, to your friends. But to the Abosom and the Samanfo and Nyame wa Nyame, you make yourself repulsive, and you are repelled by them and they are repelled by you. Your Okraa dwells within you. If you engage in disorder, you will repel your Okraa. And if you maintain that stature, maintain that perverse orientation, then your Okraa will not continue to wait or dwell with you. You can neglect your Okraa and your Okraa will be disaligned. However, it will dwell with you and wait for a time for you to get realigned. But if you're consciously and deliberately engaged in perverse, disordered activity, continuously, perpetually, not just through ignorance, but through perverse desire, like the whites and their offspring were, then you repel that cry. It won't just sit on the side and wait for you to realign. It will return to Nyame wa Nyame, of course give that report, and then it will be reabsorbed into the Kra, the great Ka and Kait, the great Kra and Krawa of Nyame wa Nyame. Just like a drop of water, when it returns to the ocean, it loses its individuality because it becomes absorbed, and that individuality is gone forever. When the whites and their offspring, a small percentage, like cancerous cells developing within the healthy cells, the healthy body, began to proliferate, and we expelled them. Some of them escaped, extermination, and they were drawn up into northern Eurasia. They were engaged in perverse activity. That's why they were forced out in the first place. Most people in our communities, if they were engaged in perverse activity, child molestation, rape, murder, dissexuality, any kind of perverse activity, we would either execute the people, or eventually we would exile them, or some of them would escape so they can continue doing what they're doing. That happened in the past. That happens even today. So originally, when some of our people engaged in that perverse behavior, the ones who didn't, who were able to escape, they went up into northern Eurasia. They were drawn up into that region. It wasn't just the ice age that caught them up and caused them to have certain mutations. That was part of it. But the number one reason they are different from us is because spiritually their Kra has disengaged. It disengaged at that particular time, and once the Kra disengaged perpetually, it went back to Nyame wa Nyame and was reabsorbed. They do not have a Kra. They will never have a Kra. So they're like corpses going through rigor mortis. They still operate, but through our practices, through our normal, natural interactions, once we start, to function harmoniously and naturally as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, the gradual, incremental demise of the whites and their offspring just through regular deep population, as time goes on, their population is shrinking. As we speak, there have been a negative population growth for over 30 years. Well, that process will increase very rapidly when we get back to who we truly are and how we should be functioning and how we should be interacting with them in the world. So we just wanted to show the difference between the way we incarnate. We go from the physical world, ancestral realm, to Nyame wa Nyame, receive our divine consciousness, our portion of Abosom, then we are eventually sent into the world. The whites and their offspring make their transition. Their spirits go to the lower level of the spirit realm, wait, and go right back into the physical world. They don't have a Kra. The repulsion of the Kra and the leaving of the divine black substance, the little divine black substance within your head, just like the divine black substance of space is the seat of the Ka and Kait, the divine, expansive, all-pervasive consciousness of the Supreme Being. You have a portion of that sphere of black power, a divinity dwelling within you. Once that force of black power, black substance, that divine entity is repelled from the person and leaves the person and is reabsorbed into the great black substance of space, then of course that blackness in your skin at some point will leave in some fashion, and this is how the whites in our offspring became bleached out. When people are isolated and engaged in incest, that greatly increases the incidence of albinism. So you can go from having an albino born in 1 out of every 10,000 births to 1 out of every 100 births rather rapidly when you have people isolated and they engage in the process of incest. And the autoimmune disease, often called vitiligo, that also kicked in during that particular time. But it wasn't just the climate, it wasn't just the diet. They were engaged in the perversity of incest and dissexuality, which created a whole host of perverse disease states within these people. But it all began with the Kraa being repelled because of their disordered behavior, and that would manifest as a perverse physiology, perverse morphology, and of course a distorted spirit. Okay, before we go forward, let's see if we had any, saw a couple of comments, a couple of questions. Okay, so you said, I can assume that we reincarnate with the Ntoroou governing our Kraa, and okay, we're going to get into that next. Okay, in fact, open up the text. Now we just went through in the beginning we talked about the race in the Kraa. We talked about the origin of the term Kraa. We talked about Kraa meaning to take leave and so forth. We talked about all these different sections. We talked about the Kraa dwelling in the head region. In the text, we just go into a great amount of detail, and we prove from ancient Kamit and use the Medutu, the hieroglyphic text, as well as the Akan language and cultural, oral tradition. We show just in detail what we just went over, we just highlighted. So we're just kind of going through the basic points right now. But in the book, once you read the book again and you watch the video, then you have a clearer understanding on certain points. So we're not going to go through every single point, but we will cover the most poignant aspects of the text. Okay, so we went through that section. We talked about to a certain extent, the Okra and Okraa. We talked about reincarnation. We talked about the race and the Okra and Okraa. So let's get into, we're going to talk about the Nkraa and the Nkrabia, and then we're going to talk about the She and the Shebia. Now we show in the text, we show, and of course the major aspect of the text is there's an image of the brain. Amemini in our Akan culture is one of the terms for the brain, also nhoma. So the brain with the cerebrum, right and left hemisphere, and then the cerebellum in the back also has a right and a left hemisphere. If you look at the functions of the cerebrum, it deals with consciousness and intelligence and formulating ideas, and the right hemisphere deals with intuitive and congregative thinking and holistic thinking and so forth, and then the left hemisphere deals with analysis, linear analysis, congregative thinking, intuition. That's the right hemisphere, but the left hemisphere, linear analysis, segregative thinking, breaking things down into small component parts, defining things, and so forth, while the right hemisphere pulls those different definitions together in a whole. It's like the right hemisphere can take different colors, it's creative, intuitive, innovative, and create a new image, while the left hemisphere would define every single color, every single shape, how the various different linkages and so forth. So you have those functions of the cerebrum, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. In the cerebellum, that deals with motor movement, muscles, coordination, equilibrium, things that have to do with power or wielding power. So one is dealing with consciousness, with ideas, and the manner in which those ideas are put forth, how they interact, behaviors, and things like that. The cerebellum deals with the motive power that the information coming from the brain through the different parts of the body, sending information to the nervous system and the muscle groups so that we can function, coordinate, balance, wield our power directly from that center of operation. So we use that because the Kra, the Okrawa, dwells in the head. You will see that the major symbol in Kemet for the Ka are two arms raised up in such a fashion. And inside the space of the two arms, of course, arms and the shoulders, that's the head space. So the Ka is that which receives the Ba, or the divine life living energy. The Ka is the consciousness. So when the Ka and the Ba in Kemet are the soul and the spirit, the divine conscious spirit, and in Akan is Kra and Bra, or Bara, Obara and Okara. In Akan is Ka and Ba in ancient Kemet. So the two arms receive that life force energy, that divine living energy. In Akan, the term Kra Do, meaning the seat of the Kra, that's the term for shoulders. So Kra Do meaning the seat of the Kra, your shoulders are the seat of the Kra. That's a description. In ancient Kemet, they just show the actual entity. They show the shoulders and the two arms. And inside that space is the head. Sometimes they show the shoulders and the two arms as a symbol on top of the head of the person, showing that the Ka dwells within the head and governs the head. It is your physical brain is the physical organ seat of the Okraa. Inside the physical brain, of course, is the Abatum, the neuromelanin, and that's the physiological seat, chemical seat of the Kra, that black substance within your brain that apexes in the brain. You have black substance all throughout your body, in your skin, eyes, major organs and systems. It reaches this apex in the brain, in the 12 major centers of the brain. That's the neuromelanin, the Abatum. That's the chemical seat, the black substance within your body that comes actually from the black substance of space, ultimately, that dwells within your body. That's the chemical seat of the Kra within your head. So that's why they show the Ka symbol on the head, because that's the seat, and then the Abosom that dwells in that seat is your personal divinity that you communicate with. Okay, so that's the symbol. So we show that symbol in the book, and then we also show, let me just show you a picture so you can see. We show a picture of the Ka itself on the head of one of the pair A, one of the Nasut. And we also show a symbol, also show a picture of the Ka in the form of a statue of Tutankhamen, the pair A, the Nasut, the king, very well known. Because sometimes the Ka itself is just shown as the full figure of the person, and sometimes it's just shown as the symbol on top of the head. Okay, I don't see the page where that is, but okay, here it is. So that's the Ka statue of Tutankhamen. So sometimes they indicate the Ka by the entire person. Sometimes your Ka, your Kra, will manifest to you when you're communicating with your Kra as an image of yourself, just like an image in the mirror. When you look at your reflection in the mirror, of course, that is a reflection. That's not actually you. It's reflecting off of you the light, the luminous energy that reproduces your form in the mirror. That's very similar to, sometimes the Ka can manifest that way as an entity, but then it manifests in other ways as well. And then, of course, we show the brain inside. And okay, so we show those two, the hemispheres, the Nkra and Nkrabia, connected to the cerebrum. Nkra is dealing with message. It means message, errand, mission, and so forth. Nkra Bea is the feminizing aspect of the language in Akan culture. It often acts as a suffix to feminize nouns. So just like in ancient Kemet, we use a T to feminize nouns. In Akan culture, we use ba, bea, or ba, or wa, or sometimes just a. So WAA, like Okra, wa, BAA, it could be Okra, ba, just adding an extra A, Okra, or Okraa. That's a way to feminize nouns. Just like in ancient Kemet, the way you feminize a noun is to add a T. So Ka becomes Kat, or Kait. Ra becomes Ra-et. Amen becomes Amen-et. And that linguistic device, of course, was copied and carried into the English language. That's why if you're going to feminize a noun, a proper noun, a person, a name, then you would add the et onto it, like Paul. The feminine form is Paul-et. Anton is Antoinette, because John and Jeanette, because that same linguistic device as a diminutive for a noun was taken from ancient Kemet. So in Kemet, you use the T, the T, or the et sound. In Akan, it's the bea, or ba, or wa, or a sound. So nkra, just like you have kra or okra, is the soul. The verb kra means to leave. Nkra means message or errand or mission. As you can see, all of them are tied together cosmologically because you receive your soul, you take leave from the Supreme Being, Kra, and you also are given a message embedded within your Kra, and that's called Nkra. And then Nkra Beya is the feminine force aspect of the message. So that you have a message, a function, a mission to execute in the world. If you're to be a healer, you're the healer. If your immune system cells, they have the immune function. That's the function they execute. Your heart and cardiovascular system have that circulatory function to execute. Your esophagus and your stomach, intestines have the digestive function to execute. So it's the same thing with you. You have a specific function to execute. You have Nkra and Nkrabia, the male and female aspect of your function. A specific function, Nkra, and a manner in which you are to execute that function, Nkra Beya. Beya or Ba means female, it means woman, but it also means a place, and it also means a manner. Why does the word for female also mean place and manner? Because it's within the female that impregnation takes place. It can only happen within her, and it can only happen in a certain manner, within a certain cycle. For the male can impregnate somebody anytime, and it doesn't matter when. But the female, impregnation can only occur in a certain place within her. It's not like the male can fertilize the egg, and then the zygote can go into the male, and the body, the baby can gestate within the male, even though some fools will try to promote that because they've been listening to the whites and the offspring. But it happens in a certain place, Bea, and in a certain manner, Bea, according to a certain cycle. So the place, Bea, and the manner, Bea, happens within the Obea, or the female, also called Oba, the female. So female, place, and manner are all defined cosmologically, and they all have the same word in Akan language. So, and it's the same thing with the Medut for the letter T that feminizes nouns in Kemet. It represents a place, and it also represents a manner. It represents the womb, and also represents the manner in which things take place. So, you have the Nkra, a specific function. Say you're supposed to be a healer or a healeress. Then a specific manner in which you are to execute that function. Maybe you are to use fiery energy to heal. Maybe you're to be a healer in the sense of being a surgeon, where somebody else is a healer in the sense of being somebody who understands herbs, can communicate with the spirits of plants, the sumsum of plants, the okra of plants, and they can learn how to pick the plants, at what time of the year to pick the plants, at what time of day to pick the plants when the energy is most potent, which plants to pick, and so forth, and they can communicate with them, pick those plants, make the extracts and heal the person. Maybe somebody else learns how to use fire or use iron or a combination thereof, dealing with the Abosom that govern those entities in order to fashion surgical implements so that they can operate on somebody in a holistic fashion without creating disorder in the process. So you have a function healer, but that's not defined enough. There's a manner in which you need to execute that function so you won't create disorder in the process. So you have Nkraa and you have Nkrabeya, the male and female aspect of your divine function, which is often called your life focus or your purpose or sometimes your destiny. But you're given these male and female forces. They're cognitive with the right and left hemispheres of the cerebrum. Now that you have a specific function to execute and a certain manner in which you need to execute that function, now Nyame is not going to just give you a function and not give you the power to execute that function. So you're going to be given a function, what to execute in the world, what you ought to do from the, how you ought to live in harmony with divine order and so forth while you're executing your function. But you're also going to be given a specific configuration of spiritual forces that will allow you to carry out that function without fail and without compromise, without profanation. So you are assigned specific divinities that govern that function. You have a certain motive force, She and Shebiya. So She means to fix, to appoint. It also means to predestine, to predestinate, and so forth. The feminine aspect of that force, She Bia, means to fix or to appoint or to predestine or predestinate, and so forth. And just like Nkraa and Nkrabia comes from Ka and Kait, She and Shebia comes from She or Shai and Shayet. And these are two Abosom in ancient Kemet. So you have the Abosom Ka and Kait in ancient Kemet, the divine forces of consciousness and intelligence. And then you have the forces Shai and Shayet, which are forces of predestination, but it's not predestination in the sense of everything is laid out for you and that's what happens. You're given a function to execute, a manner in which to execute that function, and then you're given She and Shebiya. She means to fix, to appoint, to assign. Oshe means that which is fixed or arranged. That's why we say Nyame wa Nyame in Sheshe, the Supreme Being's arrangement or order, that which is fixed or ordered. Now, you have a specific function, something affixed. You have an assignment, a mission to execute in the world. That's what you're given. Now, if you follow it, that's up to you. But you are given. So it's not the notion of a predestined fate and nothing you can do is going to change anything because you're stuck doing a certain thing. You have a specific function to execute. If you live in harmony with that function, you create order in your life. If you refuse to execute that function, you create perpetual disorder in your life. So you can make that decision. And if you live in the harmony with divine order, you will align with the crop. But the She and Shebiya as a verb means to compel, to impel, compulsion as a noun, impulsion, and so forth. So you have consciousness in the Nkraa and Nkrabia, a consciousness of what your function is, who you are in relation to your function, and the manner in which you're to execute that function. Nkraa and Nkrabia. Then you have She and Shebiya. You have a force of compulsion, She, to arrange, to fix, to appoint, and execute your function. You have a force of compulsion and impulsion and a manner in which to use that force to execute your function. So before we go forward with that, let me see, are there any questions so far? And let me show the pages in the book where we're dealing with some of that information. After we get through Nkraa and Nkrabia, She and Shebiya, We give a example here. If you look at the diagram, we show the brain, and we show the position of the Nkra, the She, and Shebia, and we're going through it, we're summarizing it, but as you read the text in detail, then you will have a better understanding once you have listened to the tape, to the recording. We also show here the judgment scene of ancient Kamit, and we show the image of the Abosom Shai, from which the term Shai or She in Akan culture comes from. Okay. So just to recap that section, you're given a function to execute in the world. You're given a function to execute in the world. You're given an Okraa, a personal Abosom, a divinity that dwells within your head. And encoded within that divinity is your Nkra and Nkrabia, the right and left hemisphere, dealing with the consciousness of who you are, what your function is, and how to execute that function without creating disorder in the process. And then you're also given the She and the Shebia, cognate with the cerebellum, the right and left hemispheres of the cerebellum that govern motor movement, equilibrium, coordination, balance, force, and so forth. And She and Shebia means the force of compulsion, impulsion, and so forth. You're given that motive power, that motive force to execute that function that you've been given. That motive force will allow you to employ the energy that Nyame gives you in a manner that supports your function but doesn't create disorder in the process. So you will employ your energy complex to do what you're supposed to do harmoniously in the world. Say if you're supposed to be a healer, or you're supposed to be an engineer, or a scientist, or whatever biologist, whatever you're supposed to do, whatever function you'd execute, you're given a knowledge of that function, how to execute that function in a certain manner that doesn't create disorder. Then you're given a motive force to employ your energy to support that function, but not to support it in a manner that will create disorder somewhere else. If you attempt to use your motive force to employ your configuration of energy to engage in perverse disordered behavior, then the Abosom who are connected to you will disconnect. They will not allow you to use their energy to create disorder or to engage in insane behavior. They depart. So the only energy you have left is the residual energy, minor emanations from plant life, from mineral life, discarnate wayward spirits and things like that. So perverse so-called priests and priestesses and spiritualists, they have no connection to Abosom, to Orisha, to Vodou, and so forth. So they have to rely on the emanations, the weak emanations emanating from the auras of plants, animals, minerals, and discarnate wayward spirits who are disconnected from their Kra or don't have no Kra at all, and they employ them to do work for them. No different than if you went to a crackhead on the street and gave them something, gave them some money or some food to go execute a task for you that was criminal, like to go steal something or do whatever. If you give them something, they may go and do it for you and execute that task. It's the same thing with a corrupt spiritualist, an unscrupulous so-called priest or priestess who Orisha have left them, the Abosom have left them, the Vodou have left them. They still have these physical shrines in the house, but the actual Vodou, Abosom, Orisha are gone. So the only spirits left to take up residence in those shrines are discarnate, wayward, perverse, disordered spirits who are not in harmony with any Kra, any Abosom, or don't even have a Kra, and they use these crackhead type spirits to do work for them and make some people believe that they're actually working with the Abosom. Okay, so let's see. So it's a couple of questions on here. All right, so y'all look like you had a couple of questions about monogamy. Okay, Okay, you asked what is the best way to practice realignment with oneself, Okra. Okay, that's the second part. We're about to get into that, talking about the Kuduo and the Akra section. One person said it's monogamy disorder. And then I think I saw somebody post the so no, and we have a Ma'al-Keru webcast talking about polygamy, polygyny, and polyandry, and the difference between those and polygamy and monogamy. Monogamy is not disorder, polygamy is not disorder. You can engage in disorder within monogamy, and you can engage in disorder within polygamy, but if you're in harmony with your Kra, and whoever you're connected to is listening to their Kra, then the only kind of marriage situation that you will enter into is one that you need to enter into. Some people do not need to be in a polygamous marriage. In fact, most of our people don't need to be in a polygamous marriage. There's a small percentage who can engage in that if their Okra directs them, and the females as well. They're listening to their Okra. They're not listening to the person who's trying to lure them into a marriage. They're not listening to some pseudo priest or priestess. They're not listening to some pseudo Afrocentric theorists talking about the necessity of polygamy and all that other foolishness. If they're Okra and they're Nsamanfo and they're Abosom, independent of anybody else directs them in that fashion, then they can move forward with confidence. If they're moving forward in that fashion because somebody else is telling them to do it, then you're making a big mistake. You're engaging in disorder because everything revolves around the Kra. And somebody did post the name of the webcast. So if you go to the Ma'al-Keru page, let me put that on the site. Okay, so Odwirafo.com/Ma'al-Keru page.html, and we have a number of webcasts, audio webcasts, and one of them deals directly with that question. Okay, so you had a couple of questions, comments about that particular thing. Somebody posted that. Also on our set's connection with the Ka and Kait. If you look in the Kuku-Tuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, and all these, when you go to the Odwirafo.com website, you will find the links to all of these. I can put the link up though for those people who will see this later. All right. In the Kuku-Tuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, in the section when we're talking about Asara Set and Heru, which was originally the second CD, track 3, is actually the 8th track of the MP3, the 8th file. When we're talking about Asara Set and Heru, we go into a little bit of detail about showing how on Earth, Asar and Aset function as a feminine and masculine aspect, or masculine and feminine aspect of the Ka and Kait in the manner that they function within society, and connected to your pituitary gland, which is a master gland. It is connected to the brain, of course. Sometimes you'll find that, Europeans will say that it's not connected in a sense, and they just speak of it as a totally independent gland, but of course it is connected to the brain. So the pituitary gland, the two major lobes of the pituitary gland, are connected to Asar and Aset as they regulate the function. That gland regulates the functions of other glands. Asar and Aset have Awusi and Adwa in Akan culture have regulatory functions in creation, and in that sense they function as a Ka and a Kait within that. But in the Kuku-Tuntun, we go into detail about that, the relationship of Asar and Aset and the Ka and the Kait. And also on the Akra and Abosom page, we have articles dealing with them. On the Akradin Abosom page, we have articles, an article on Awusi, Asar, and an article on Ajwa, Aset, and we go into a great bit of detail showing the connection with the Ka, the Kait, with Asar and Aset, and so forth. Let me get a drink of water real quick and we'll be back. Okay, and I just want to see if I have any more questions on that. Okay, so now we went through most of the general pieces about Nkra, Nkrabia, She, and Shebia, and the Ka and Kait in general. The next piece we want to get to, you see here, these images here talking about the 7 head Heru and the 12 male Abosom in the Pertinent Heru, the so-called Book of the Dead. And then we're going to get into the Kradim Bosom. And this is near the end of the book, and we're going to show these, the information on the Okra Guade. And once we go over that portion, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything, then you'll have a basic foundation to understand everything in the text once you start reading and studying the text. Once you listen to this, listen to the recording and read the book concurrently, you'll have a good deal of information to help you get through the entire text. First, we want to deal with the patrilineal inherited Abosom, because I saw somebody mention that, and that's part of the next process. So we talked about the different divisions of the crop. So just like you have a brain, major divisions, the cerebrum and cerebellum. The cerebrum has the right and left hemisphere. Cerebellum has the right and the left hemisphere. So these are the 4 major divisions of the brain, and they're cognate with the Nkra, Nkrabia, She, and Shebia. Now the entire complex we call the Okra complex, or the Okra or Okrawa complex. That's the feminine version. The Ka complex, the Kait complex. We call it a complex because there are different divisions. They have their own functions, and they also have Abosom associated with them. Now we talked about She and Shebia, meaning to fix, to appoint, to compel, to impel, the motive force that you have within you that's assigned to you, and you can use that motive force, that force of compulsion. You're compelled to execute your Nkra and your Nkrabia. You impel your energy to engage in that process. You use your motive force to activate the energy you've been given in a harmonious way, instead of trying to activate the energy you're given and employ that energy towards something disharmonious. You activate the energy, you turn it on, you turn it off, so you have energy and a manner in which to utilize that energy, a manner in which to open it up and close it, so to speak, so you can support your divine function. That's the She and the Shebia. And then you have Nkra and Nkrabia. The Nkra and Nkrabia, the regions, male and female aspects of the divine consciousness or knowledge or intelligence of what your function is, the nature of that function, and how to execute that function in a certain manner that's harmonious. How to be a healer in a harmonious fashion. How to be a builder, engineer in a harmonious fashion. How to be an innovator or inventor in a harmonious fashion. How to be a protector and immune system cell in the community in a harmonious fashion. The knowledge, the consciousness of that function, and the manner in which you must execute that function in order to bring harmony to Eriase, to the world, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community. That's dealing with the Nkra and Nkrabia, which in Kamit is the Ka and the Kait. So the great Abosom Ka and Kait govern those two, the Nkra and Nkrabia. Then in She and Shebia, the forces She or Shai and Shayet, the male and female forces of impulsion, appointing, fixing, and you also see that it means value and goods and possessions and so forth. The reason why that which we use to appoint, to affix, to predestine, to establish and so forth is also associated with value, goods, possessions, and they'll say the deity of luck and the deity of fortune. That's not a good definition, but the reason why they say that, why Shai and Shayet are the deities of good luck and fortune, but also the deities of possession and goods and values, valuables, and also dealing with to force, to predestinate, to appoint, and so forth, is because when you have a certain function, that's your value. Your heart's value is this function in the body to execute circulatory functions, pump blood, send nutrients and oxygen and so forth to all the cells in the body. That's its value. If it didn't execute its function, then it has no value. Your lungs' value is tied up in their function. Your liver's value is tied up in its function. So when they talk about Shai and Shayet, the motive force that employs your energy to support your function, that's its value. That's why it has something to do with goods, with luck, fortune, and so forth. If you employ your energy to support your divine function, then you will have quote-unquote good fortune, good luck, your prosperity, and so forth. If you employ your energy, you use your She and your Shebia to employ or impel or compel your energy to engage in a disorderly fashion, then you will have misfortune, quote-unquote bad luck, but that's not even a true concept. You'll engage in perverse behavior, and you'll suffer the consequences in some fashion and in at some time. So Shai and Shayet govern the She and Shebia. Ka and Kait govern the Ka, the Nkra and Nkrabia, and then your whole Kra governs that complex. Now those are the general aspects. Just like every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person has a brain, they have 2 hemispheres for the cerebrum and 2 hemispheres for the cerebellum. So they all have the same general kinds of functions within the body. But you are a unique individual. You come through a specific blood circle. You have a mother and a father, and you have a blood circle, blood lineage from both sides, and that colors the manner in which you will function. And we are sent by Nyame through specific blood circles that carry a specific energy complex, and that further defines and gives nuance to the nature of our energy. So if we're supposed to be a healer or a healeress, that's the function that's connected to our Nkra and Nkrabia. Now the Okraa is a divinity. It's a little drop of the great black substance, the Ka and Kait of the universe, the black substance of creation. The Nyame is divine consciousness. So you're that little black sphere of power. You have a portion of it dwelling within your head. A portion was taken from the great black substance, fashioned, and it dwells within your head. But every other Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person also has a portion, one of those spheres of energy dwelling within their head. So what's the difference between yours and someone else's? Well, you come through a certain lineage that further defines and gives nuance to your particular black sphere of power and energy. You're assigned pre-incarnation, so you're already given the Okraa, and it's a black sphere of energy, and it's divided into Nkra, Nkrabia, She, and Shebia. But now that Kra is guided by what we would call a Kradin Abosom in Akan culture. So before we incarnate into the world, there are 11 Kradin Abosom. Nyame assigns us to one of those Kradin Abosom, and we carry that Abosom's energy into the world. So that Kra that's attached to us, if you're connected to Ajua, who is all set, if your Okra is connected to her, Then when your Okraa is placed inside of your spirit brain is placed inside of your spirit body, now you will naturally be drawn to the energy of Adwa because your Okraa, part of that nuance or refinement of its characteristics, comes through the assignment of Adwa guiding your Okraa. So you'll be born on Joada or Ajoada, which in our Akan culture is Monday, and that is an indication that before you incarnated, when you were with Nyame wa Nyame, you were assigned to Nana Adwa, who in Kamit is called Aset, in Yoruba is called Oduduwa or Iyanla, the wife of Babanla, which is Obatala, and Oduduwa, the black goddess, the great black goddess, Oduduwa, not the male that they would say is the progenitor. We're talking about the black earth divinity, female Orisha, Oduduwa, who is the wife of Orishanla or Obatala. So that's Obatala, Oduduwa or Oduwa is Awusi and Ajuwa. Ajuwa and Oduwa are the same force. Idemili in Igbo, Minona in Vodoun. We have an article on Ajuwa going into all these differences and the connections between these different forces and different traditions on the Akron Abosom site. So if you were connected to Ajuwa before you were in pre-incarnation, then when you're sent into the world, you will be born on Ajuwa Da. Even if somebody went into complications, had to have a cesarean section, it's going to work out in a fashion where you are born and come into the world on the day of that particular Abosom. So when a baby is born on a certain day, we know that they were assigned to that Abosom pre-incarnation and they were sent into the world on that particular day. And of course, this is only with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. No other people can have names associated with the Kra because they don't have a Kra. So your Kra will be governed. Your Kra is assigned to an Abosom that guides the Kra. So it's no longer just an undefined sphere of power that just has 4 divisions. It's a sphere of power, 4 divisions, that's given character from a specific Abosom. Just like we have the sun, we have the moon, we have oceans, we have rivers, carrying different energy in creation, fiery energy, watery energy, airy, earthy, and so forth, that enriches the created order. We come into the world to support those functions. So if we come into the world to support the healing function in a watery, cool kind of medium, then we're assigned, our Kra is assigned, our black sphere of power is assigned to one of the Abosom, which is Nana Ajuwa, and when we come into the world, we're connected with her. However, when you come into the world, you're sent through a specific lineage. You have a mother, you have a father, and you're connected to the blood circle of these people that goes back. It's very similar to DNA. When you come in once you get into that womb, then the DNA of the mother and the DNA of the father combine, and you have characteristics from the mother and you have characteristics from the father. In Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit culture, and only for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, the sperm cell, of course, is a living cell and it's operating, it has energy. But for us, there's an Abosom energy that governs the animation of that cell. So we're connected to a patrilineal or patricircular Abosom on the father's side that we inherit from the father's side. And then the ovum also is animated by the energy of an Abosom on the mother's side. And when we incarnate into the world, we receive that energy. We inherit that Abosom from the mother's side and inherit the Abosom from the father's side. So you have a patrilineal Abosom, Ntorou, or Eja Abosom, meaning father's bosom. And then you have a matrilineal Abosom that you inherit from your mother, which is the Abusia bosom, or sometimes called Ntong, or Ntorou, which becomes Ntorotu. So Ntorou and Ntong is Ntorou, Ntorot, Neteru, Netertu, ancient Kamit, but the Neteru and Netertu is just an Egyptologist not really understanding how to pronounce the term, so they insert the letter E in between consonants when they don't know the proper pronunciation, but NTR in Akan is pronounced Ntoroou, and NTRT, which they would say Neteru, is Ntorotu, Ntorou, or Ntong in Akan. So you have an Ntoroou and an Ntong. And Abosom, father's divinity, Abosom, a divinity coming through your mother's matricline. So you have those two from the mother and father, and then at the top you have the Abosom governing your Kra, which we call the Kradin Bosom. So those three together, that triangle of energy, defines who you are spiritually, what your function is, and how to execute that function according to the specific blood circles that you come from. For Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit in America, our Ntorou and Ntorotu, our patrilineal Abosom and matrilineal Abosom, are those Abosom from those lineages that were attached to our spirits before the enslavement process kicked in. When we were still living on the continent and we were connected to certain Abosom, those Abosom we carry with us. When our spirits die and we separate from the body and we live in the ancestral realm for a while, and then some of our descendants get snatched up from Afurakani a couple of hundred years ago and are sent into America through the enslavement process, and eventually they mix with a number of different groups, and sometimes through rape and perversity, the blood was polluted to a certain degree by the rape of the whites and their offspring, or pseudo-Native Americans, or whatever. Even though our melanin-dominant blood still is dominant, there are no Abosom associated with one of the whites and their offspring. There are no Abosom associated with pseudo-Native Americans who are just white Asians who migrated from Asia. They have no connection to any Abosom or divine forces of nature. They just work with their deceased, discarnate relatives, and very often promote these spirits as divinities falsely. So we're talking about Abosom that were connected to us. We made our transition. We're ancestors and ancestresses in the spirit realm. We see our descendants go through the whole enslavement process, and then we reincarnate through one of them. And we grow up and learn that we're Akan, and we learn about the Ntoroou and Abosom, and we're like, but wait a minute, some of my lineage was not Akan, some of my lineage was not whatever. If you're Akan, if you're an Akan person who was living in Ghana or Ivory Coast 200 years ago, and you made your transition, and then some of your descendants get caught up in enslavement, and through generation after generation they mix with different groups and so forth, and one of your great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters is ready to get married and copulate and draw you back into the world, you may be born through a lineage, blood-wise, that has been mixed for a number of years, and you may be lighter brown instead of perfectly black because of the admixture, because of the pollution. But you're still the same Akan spirit, even though your mother may have had an Igbo grandmother, Eve great-grandfather, somebody from another group, Dogon or whatever, because of moving from plantation to plantation and so forth. But you're the same Akan spirit that you were when you lived in Ghana, and now you reincarnate. Your blood may be mixed, but your Okrawa is not mixed. So you're connected to the same Akan ancestresses and ancestors, and you're also connected to the same Ntorou, patrilineal Abosom, inherited from the father's side when you lived back in Ghana a couple of hundred years ago, and the matrilineal Abosom, the Abusi Abosom, you're still connected to that one that you were connected to before the Musor Kessie, before the Great Perversity, before enslavement. Those Abosom still incarnate with you, so it doesn't matter that there was blood mixture. These are the Abosom that you were connected to before enslavement began, and they remain with you. So even if you're an Akan person now, you may have a mother and father who are connected to different groups. Physiologically, you will have a connection to these different Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ethnic groups. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that just makes us appreciate the different, our diversity as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, our rituals, our approach to life, and so forth. But fundamentally, our cultures are fundamentally cosmologically the same with different expressions. So, but spiritually, you are the same. With regard to your Kraa, you are the same Kraa, you're the same spirit that is reincarnated, that lived before as an Akan, and now you're back again as an Akan. And your matrilineal and patrilineal divinities that you inherited from the mother's and father's side is those. So the way we find out about them is dealing with the Nsamanfo, of course, but also dealing directly with the Kraa. And that's the next section we're going to get into. Okay, so let me see if anybody have any other questions with regard to that. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, so the last section of the book, and we also have a section dealing with Kunwimu, Khnum, and ancient Kemet, who fashions the body and the spirit on his divine potter's wheel, and he's part of that process of connecting the Ka with the body and so forth. So we talk a little bit about that. The last section of the book, we're talking about the Okra Guare, which is, or Okra Guare, which means, Guare means to wash or to cleanse. And of course the Kraa is the soul. So it's the soul washing, the soul cleansing ritual. We show images of vessels that are used for that. We also show images of the Gua. We're not going to get into that right now. But a lot of it is very straightforward. We just want to touch on, if you look at the section with the Kuduo, that's a vessel that we use to wash the Kraa ritually. And then also, let's see, there's one other section. Okay, yeah, well, we'll just look at that section dealing with the Kuduo. And one other piece before we leave the section on the Kradin Bosom. When you're born under the guidance of a Kradin Bosom, you're assigned a Kradin Bosom. They're connected with the 7 days of the Akan week, which are the same 7 days of the so-called, Gregorian calendar. They learned that system from us. So these 11 Abosom are connected to these days of the week. Your Nkra and Nkrabia are connected to the Kradin Bosom. And then your She and Shebia are connected to the patrilineal, inherited Abosom from the father's side, pre-enslavement, the matrilineal Abosom connected to the mother's side, pre-enslavement. These are the specific configuration of forces you are given by Nyame wa Nyame, so that you can use them to execute the function you are given by Nyame wa Nyame. So your She and Shebia is your motive force, your force of impulsion, compulsion, and you use that force to employ the energy of whatever patrilineal or matrilineal divinity that you're connected to. And at first, let's just give an example. We gave an example in the book. So say a spirit goes before Nyame wa Nyame, they're given their Kraa, they're assigned to Nana Adjua, or say Nana Bena, who is actually Heru Behudet in ancient Kemet, Bena and Akan, Ogun in Yoruba, Ogu in Vodoun. And this is a male spirit connected with Bena. So this person has a function to execute in the world. Maybe he's supposed to be a defender, an immune system cell in creation. So his Kraa, he's given our Kraa, and his Okraa is assigned to the Abosom Bena. So of course the person is going to be born on Benada, which is Tuesday, Bena's day. And he's going to be given the name, the Kradin, the soul name, Kwa Bena. Every male born on Tuesday or Benada in our current culture, their Kradin is automatically Kwa Bena, meaning they're a subject of Bena. Or sometimes they pronounce it Ko Bena or Ko Bera, or different variations, but typically Kwabena, and Kwabena means a servant or a subject of the Abosom Bena. When the child is born on Bena Da, the parents know automatically that this spirit, when they went to Inyame wa Inyame, their Okraa was assigned to Bena. So they automatically have the name Kwabena, and then they're given other names that are connected to their lineage and so forth. So just by virtue of the fact that they're born on that day, and they watch the child and watch how the child operates even before when the child was in the womb, they could connect with the child's spirit, soon connect with the child's Okraa, and notice the kind of characteristics they have. Some people get divination to learn about certain things. This child will carry the energy of Bena. They will manifest the characteristics of Bena, which are varied, but it's a force of nature, operates through the immune system, destroys disorder and its purveyors. So they will carry that energy. On the male side, if they're born on that day, they will be more, their Kradim Bosom will be Bena. The female is called Abena. So Bena in ancient Kemet is called Heru Behudet, or Herakuti. Abena in ancient Kemet is called Sekhmet. So Bena and Abena and Akan are Heru Behudet, or Heru Bedet, or Heru Bedat, or Heru Bena. Bena, that's where Bena comes from. And then Sekhmet, one of her titles is Behudat. And of course that's Behudat, Bena, and so forth. We have articles on both of them on the Akradim Bosom page going into detail about their connection to Kemet, Yoruba, Vodou, and Akan, and the Kradim Bosom, and so forth. So as the male, he will be associated and connected. His Kradim Bosom will be Bena. Abena will also be connected with him as well, because that's the female force that complements the male force, but his Kradim Bosom will be Bena. If it was a female, her Kradim Bosom will be Abena, even though she will be assisted by Bena as well, because that's the complementary male force. But her Kradim Bosom will be Abena, and she will be named Abena if she's born, of course, on Benada or Abenada. And it's the same thing with the other forces. So that govern the 7 days of the week. So if the person is born to be a certain kind of, execute a certain function, maybe they're a healer, but they're supposed to be a healer with a fiery, force. They're Okraa, that black sphere of energy that dwells within their spirit, is assigned to Bena. Then the child is born on Benada. And then the child is given the Kradim Kwa Bena. And every time somebody calls the child Kwa Bena, that stimulates the child's Sum to align or realign with their Okraa. Every time the child hears that combination of sound waves, or thinks about that combination of sound waves, or repeats that combination of sound waves, it helps to realign them on a regular basis. And since your name is the specific grouping of sound waves you hear more than any other grouping throughout the course of your life, that's the reason we utilize the name properly to align and realign the person's spirit with their Kra, the Sum with their Kra. So this person's Kra will be governed by Bena, and they will have a name reflecting that, Kwabena, or if they're connected with Abena, Abena. But they came through a certain patrilineal and matrilineal, or patricircular or matricircular blood, family. So the divinities that came with that family, their spiritual DNA, or patricircular divinities, Abosom and Abosom, they will be connected with them as well. And those two Abosom are connected to the motor portions, the motive force portions, not only of the brain, which is the physical seat of the She and Shebia, but also the spiritual seat. So just like they have their Nkra and Nkrabia will be governed in this example by Bena and Abena, the She and Shebia will be governed by the patrilineal Abosom and the matrilineal Abosom. In the example of the book, we talked about the Asona, the Abosom for the Asona clan as an example, and then the Abosom called Nana Afram on the patrilineal side. So the person had received or inherited the Abosom Nana Afram. He came from the Asona clan and the Abosom of that clan. That was the patrilineal and matrilineal Abosom, and then his crowd was governed by Bena. So he was called Kwabena. He executes his function. He knows the nature of his function, who he is in relationship to it, and the manner in which he needs to execute that healing immune response function in the world. Then, through his She and Shebia, he's given a specific configuration of forces, Nanafram and the Asona Abosom combined, that energy combined, a specific configuration that he needs to employ in order to support his function, to support his healing immune response function. He needs to employ that energy. He needs to know how to open it up, turn it on, open up the valve, and close it up. He needs to know how to use it, how expansive it needs to be at a certain point, how to contract that energy, how to use it in a harmonious fashion. If he attempts to use his She and Shebia to employ or open up or turn on and turn off the energy in a perverse fashion, then those Abosom will leave him, and he won't have any access to their energy any longer. If he consistently lives out of harmony with Bena, then Bena will detach, will leave him alone, and his own Kra will leave him alone. And then he won't have access to that force of nature. So then all he can do is access perverse, discarnate spirits and engage in lustful and malicious behavior. So those are the, we have, detailed examples in the book. We just wanted to give you the notion of the Nkra, Nkrabia, She, and Shebia, and then the Kradi and Bosom that govern the Nkra and Nkrabia, and the patrilineal and matrilineal Abosom that govern the She and the Shebia. Okay, and before, let me make sure. Okay, and so the last piece, which is just Okra Guade, which means the cleansing of the Kra. People would take a certain vessel using water and sometimes different herbs. Hold on 1 second. Okay, excuse me. Using certain herbs, water, different, depending on what, depends on the family, depends on the group, what specific elements they will use, but definitely part of it will be including the water. Typically, we would go to the specific river or body of water that is governed by our Edge Abosom, our patrilineal inherited Abosom, and we will utilize that water to cleanse the head physically, and then communicate with the Kradi and Bosom and the Ntorotu to cleanse the debris, spiritual debris from our Kra region, so that we can communicate with the Kra more clearly and more efficaciously. So that's basically the crux of the Okra Guade piece. We just go into more detail about that. It talks about, we give examples of how the Kra is worshipped because it's a personal divinity. In the Yoruba tradition, the Ori Inu is worshipped. In the Vodoun tradition, the Se Lido is worshipped. In the Igbo tradition, the Chi, or the divine consciousness, is a divinity that's worshipped. When we sit down and establish a shrine specifically for our Kra, our Okra, it is our Okra, or our soul, because it is an entity that was assigned to us. Just like you have children, they are your children because they came out of you. They're individual entities, but they belong to you. The Okra is an entity, it's a force in nature that communicates, it's a deity, but because it was assigned to you, it is your Kra. So you communicate with your soul, communicate with your Kra. When you communicate with that divinity, very often it manifests, as a pull in the head, the pull towards, harmonious behavior. Once you engage in more ritual practice, that pull will become not just a pull, but you will be able to engage in dialogue with this force in nature, just like you can engage in dialogue with a human being or with other ancestral spirits or Abosom. It's a force in nature. Sometimes those communications have already happened and we don't even recognize that we've been communicating with the Abosom in different degrees ever since we were children. So when we engage in the Okra Guade ceremony, we sit down, we cleanse our heads, whether we do it in the river or we establish that vessel utilize water ritually and other elements ritually, and use that water to cleanse our head, cleanse it physically, but spiritually as a magnetic force to pull the debris, discordant energy off of the Kra region, off of the head, so we can have a more clear communication with the Kra, so we can align our Sum and our spirits with our Kra. When you align your spirit with your Okra, that's the crux of spirituality. Your Okra as a divinity is the messenger of Inyame wa Inyame in your head. So when you align with your Okra, you're aligning with Inyame wa Inyame, and you communicate to Inyame wa Inyame through your Okra directly. So just like when we talked about Anansi weaving a web of energy to me, so-called Ashe in Yoruba, but the Tumi, or divine power or energy, as a web of energy that permeates the black substance of space, and he governs all the roads of that web of energy, and one of those web endings lands in your Okra, and the other end of it goes directly to Inyame wa Inyame. Your Okrawa is a direct connection to you, to the Supreme Being. So, and of course your Okra is encoded with your Nkra and Nkrabia, your function, and how to execute that function, your mission, your life focus in creation. And then, of course, you have the She and Shebia, the specific configuration of forces you need to employ to execute your function harmoniously. In that Okra complex, is connected to Inyame wa Inyame directly, and you can communicate with them directly. The Abosom, the divine forces in nature, knowing that every created entity, created with a capital C, has an Okra, they only come to assist us to harmonize with our Okra. They obey what Inyame wa Inyame dictates. The Okra is a portion of the divine consciousness of Inyame wa Inyame. It's an entity that was born of that divine consciousness. So everything that's in the Okra, your divine consciousness, is the message or direction of the Supreme Being. When you ask for assistance from the Abosom, assistance from, the NANASOM and Samanfo, what you're asking for is the Abosom will only empower you to follow what your Okra is telling you to do. The NANASOM and Samanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, they will only guide you according to what your Okra is telling you to do, because your Okra is the messenger of Inyame wa Inyame within the body. So they only empower and guide us according to the dictates of the Okra, because they follow Inyame wa Inyame as well. So that's why we have the diagram showing the different four divisions, show the deities, general deities connected to those divisions, and the specific divinities that you inherit through reincarnation connected with those divinities. And when you go to the Afurakani, engage in that ritual purification process, you cleanse the head so that you can communicate, realign with the Okra. That's the basis of all spirituality, because realignment with the Okra is realignment with Inyame wa Inyame. And then you have the assistance of the Abosom, the forces in all of nature, and the NANASOM and Samanfo, the spiritual forces within your blood circle, to assist you in realigning with the Supreme Being through the agency of your Kra, your Krawa. Okay. Okay, and so you had a question is like self-talk, but in a real sense, the Okra is an entity. It can detach from you. It's a force in nature, just like Awusi and Adwa and Bena and so forth. You're communicating with a divinity. It's not talking to yourself. You're yourself, and then there's a divinity, just like a divinity sitting in front of you. Or if you go to a ritual, like an Akom in the Akan tradition or a Bembe in the Yoruba tradition, and they play the drums or doing singing, dancing, doing whatever, and one of the Abosom or Orisha possesses the person, and you communicate with that Orisha, that Abosom, and that Abosom or Orisha communicates with you. It's no different with the Okra, except the seat of the Okra, that Abosom, that personal Abosom, happens to be in this region. So you could communicate directly with that Abosom in that region. Give me one more second. Okay, my bad. So you're communicating with the deity. It's not just like psychology, somebody sitting down trying to make themselves feel better and so forth. You're communicating with a force in nature, and if we don't communicate with these forces in nature, they will disappear from us. They will disengage, disalign, and return to Nyame wa Nyame. When that does happen, and we mentioned this in the text, if they're disaligned, dislocated from us, but haven't totally been reabsorbed, there are a few things that manifest, a few symptoms that manifest. One, if the Okra disengages for an extended time, the person will ultimately expire, the person will die. If it's not that extended of a time, but it dislodges from the person, is disconnected, but it's not totally gone, just disaligned and kind of off to the side in a sense, then the person will manifest certain kinds of behaviors like depression, clinical, quote unquote, clinical disorders, major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, various disorders that often you'll find on what they will call the Axis 1 in the DSM-4, which is going to be the DSM-5 very soon. These various major psychotic disorders. There's also the symptom, a third manifestation, where the Okra actually disengages and totally leaves and reconnects and reabsorbs within the great black substance of space, the great Ka and Kait, not to return. Now you have a spirit without an Okra at all, not just one that's disaligned from the Okra, but totally the Okra is gone and disintegrated. Now that kind of individual is a spirit without an Okra, like a body without a brain, and they engage in extreme antisocial, extreme disordered behavior. This is the nature of all the whites and their offspring, Asians, Hindus, Europeans, Americans, and so forth. They engage in disordered behavior because they are spirits of disorder. They don't have order, they don't have an anchor of order, which the Okra and Okraa are. They're the anchors of order or divine order within your body. They're the anchors of Nyamewa, Nyame, and Sheshe within your body, in your spirit body. If you don't have a Okra, you don't have an anchor in order, so you're just a wayward, chaotic spirit, and your behavior will manifest perversity. So you'll always see the whites and their offspring promoting dissexuality, homosexuality, false trustery, and that's trustery in and of itself is spiritual, because when people align with trustery, align with what they should be doing, what's happened in the past, and how they're going to structure their lives based on what's happened and what they know, if you give people a false trustery, then they engage in constructions that become self-destructive as opposed to constructive or positive. So so they get engaged in, they lie about trustery, they lie about culture, they lie about anything to promote disorder, promote lust, promote malice, disordered attractions, perverse repulsions, and so forth. Lust and malice instead of law and hate. They engage in the perversion of order, the perversion of love, the perversion of hate. They engage in insane behavior. So when the Okra disengages, the person either dies, the person manifests psychotic behavior, major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, these various different things, which can be remedied. But then the third piece is, of course, when the Okra totally disengages and returns to Nyame wa Nyame, and that's you can't return from that. So you'll either have chaotic entities constantly reincarnating in the world, or they will be exterminated. So, and that's part of what we need to be focused on. Okay, so you said so then maybe that is part of why some of us claim to be goddess. We are mistaking our Kra for ourselves. Some people, that will be the reason, because they know they're communicating with a force. They know there's a force dwelling within them, powerful force, and they're sensitive enough, or have sensitized themselves enough to experience the energy emanating from that force and getting some guidance from that. But a lot of it has to do with we've been given a foolish concept of what God and Goddess is and what our role is and so forth, from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, pseudo-metaphysics, pseudo-esotericism, Hermeticism, and the Kabbalah, and pseudo-Native American pseudo-spirituality and Taoism, all these different things. We've been given a false notion of the nature and function of the Kra, the Okrawa, and the Abosom, and the NANASOM and Samanfo, as a unit. The Okrawa, the Abosom, and Nsamanfo as that Obrahinasa, or that life triangle that, within that structure, all of our spirituality is encased in that structure, our entire life focus. We haven't been given that proper notion. So people have low self-esteem and they just want to be somebody. And the whites and their offspring have given them false identities and they just want to be something that they really aren't. So they move on that, and it's just powered by the sensitivity that they have to emanations of energy streaming from the crop. Okay. And you mentioned like a personal oracle, right? So something oracular. Every Abosom engages in oracular functions. Oracular just meaning that you can communicate. You're just Nkong in Akan culture, Akan language. Nkong deals with spiritual communication. Then Akom is, they talk about the Akom dance of possession or hunger or whatever, but it has to do with spiritual communication. So sometimes they'll define Nkong as a spiritual communication or an oracle. That's just a means by which you communicate. So every time you communicate with your Okraa, that's an oracular function. Every time you communicate with an Abosom, that's an oracular function taking place. Every time you communicate with one of the Nsamanfo to gain knowledge of something, that's an oracular function that you're engaging in. So yes, when you communicate with your Krade Bosom, as well as just communicating with your Okraa itself, you're engaging in oracular activity, questioning, or we would say adebisa, or things that are questions, or call bisa, or to go bisa, or to go ask, go ask a question as a designation for oracular divination. Whenever you're making an inquiry to an Abosom, including your Okraa to one of the Nsamanfo, you're engaged in oracular activity. All right. Right. Now, you will know by experience, as you said, by answers received. When you get spiritual answers from the Okraa, and one of the reasons we cleanse the Okraa on a regular basis, specifically on the Kra Da, your soul day, the day that you came into the world, the day that the Krade Bosom is dominating that particular day. That's a major day to do your Krade Akraguare soul washing, establishing a shrine and commemorate for the Okraa, as well as the Krade Bosom, and you cleanse your Okraa, and you communicate with your Okraa, but you can also communicate with the Krade Bosom at that Nkomre as well. In Akwamumai and Amadokai Tifi Mu, we establish a Krade Bosom Komre, a Krade Bosom shrine. For the Krade Bosom, like if you're born on Benada, your name is Kwabena, you're connected to the Abosom Bena. If you're Abena, you're connected to the Abosom Abena. So we establish a shrine for that Krade Bosom Bena, or Abena, or Adjua, or Awusi, or Afe, or whoever it is. But that's also the place as well that we have the Kuduo, the vessel that we use to cleanse our Okraa. The reason why we do that in Akwamu mind is because it's a reflection of what took place in the spirit realm connected with Inyame when they assigned us our Kra to one of the Kradim Bosom, like they assigned our Kra to Bena, for example. Then Bena does that Akra Guade washing ceremony, and then connects with us in the physical realm. And when we reincarnate and so forth, and it's connected to us for the rest of our lives. So we recreate that whole process by connecting with our Kra and the Kradim Bosom at the same space, because that Kradim Bosom is connected, of course, with our Kra. You'll also see in the book, we have a couple of quotes, one from an Akan writer, one from a Yoruba writer, and they both say that the Kra is worshipped, the Ori Inu in Yoruba is worshipped. They both mention that in the past, people used to have altars to their Kra. In the past, people used to have altars. Everybody would have an altar to their Ori Inu. In the past, people would have an altar to their Se Lido. In the past, they would have their altar to their Chi in Igbo. But because of the infection of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and white culture, just in general, a lot of people have pulled away from some of these practices. So in one quote dealing with the Yoruba, they would say that most people in the past had a shrine for their Ori Inu, but nowadays it's only mainly in the rural areas, and many people don't have shrines to their Ori Inu, so they're not realigning themselves with their own Ori on a daily or periodic basis. And they're engaged in, of course, behavior where they're incorporating white culture and infection and so forth. The same thing goes with the Akan. In the past, everybody would have an altar to their Kra. Nowadays, most people don't have an altar to their Kra. Many people don't even know that their Okra is an actual Abosom to be worshipped. Some people do and some people don't. And to the degree that they've been infected by Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, white culture, so-called democracy, things like that, then they disconnect with their culture, and most of the people don't have shrines for their Kra, and they're not engaged in ritual purification of their Kra on a periodic basis. At most, many people will, if they have a sickness or they overcome a sickness, or if there's some specific event going on, they may do a perfunctory Akra Guade cleansing ritual, but they're not focused on invoking the Abosom itself, because they've been taught that there is no such thing as an Abosom, and many of them think Abosom don't even exist. So we do bring that out in the book because we're returning back to the way we should be doing things, what we've done in the past, not just in West Afuraitkaitnit, but even in ancient Kamit and Khanit. We had shrines for the Ka, shrines for the Kait, and the central function of spirituality is alignment and realignment with the Ka and the Kait, the Okra and Okraa. Okay, so you mentioned the children's story, Sankofa Prada Meba, gave a version of Akra Guade. Do we do this as well? So right, so that's kind of like a version similar to what we would do. In the book, we kind of go into some detail. If you look on the Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com site, we have a couple of forum discussions dealing with Akra Guade as well as Apai ritual prayers, and we drafted just a simple ritual prayer for the Okra. So basically, when you get that kuduo, when you get a vessel, you can just get a small glass bowl, set up the shrine, as we talked about in the text, and then some of the other writings dealing with the ancestral shrines, and going to your Kra, cleansing your head, saying specific prayers to your Kra, and then sitting down and communicating and listening to this Abosom, listening to this divinity for direction. At first, you will feel certain pulls in certain directions, will manifest things. Sometimes they will use the Achinebois, or the ancestral totems that are connected to us to communicate certain messages. So you'll see those animals out through the course of the day or night or whatever. But the communication will develop to the point where you will be able to communicate with this force. Sometimes that force will manifest in front of you. It just depends on, the situation. But as the more you attune with the force, the more you will be able to communicate directly, dialogue with this Abosom. Okay. Okay. So, is that any other questions on that? Check out the Afuraitkaitnit.name.com site, because in that site we have a number of forum discussions that have span over the course of a couple of years. So a lot of the questions you might have, they may have been answered in one of those forum sections. Like if you're reading through the books or you haven't gotten to a certain text and you have a question, you can do the search inside of in the network, just a keyword search, and it'll take you to whatever discussions or comments have been made on the subject, and it may answer your question or direct you to one of our PDFs dealing with that particular subject, or you can email us and we can give you some information. So I'll put my email address in here. Okay. So akwamumind@odwirafo.com. And we also want to all right, and I'm going to post the for the people who didn't see it further down in the thread in the chat. We also, that's the link, the link to the nhoma page on the website, and that's the page where you will find the book, of course, the Okra complex, and in two formats now. We have it in PDF. We have a PDF format. The PDF is a free download, so you can download the entire book right away and read the entire book. We also have just released the other day, just a few days ago, we have the soft cover version, and through that page on the website, you can order the soft cover version of the text, and of course we'll mail that out to you. And there's also an achede or donation button, so if you didn't want to get the hardcover text and you'd rather just read the PDF, you don't have to make a donation in order to download the book. You can download the book at any time. If you want to make a donation, there's a donation button there. If you want to purchase the soft cover, you can purchase it there as well. And of course, feel free to share the site and information about the book with people who you think might be interested, so we can get that information out. Okay. So okay. Oh, I just missed. Let me see. Okay, so you're saying that you've been seeing a lot of buzzards, a lot of vultures recently, and of course that's an animal totem that's Nekebet. In Akan, she's called Abba, one of the Kradi and Abosom, but Nekebet is a major force in creation. Her animal totem, or Achinebois, is the buzzard. So, you may be connected to her, or maybe some other Abosom. There are certain matrilineal and patrilineal clans. There's a matrilineal clan, or Abusia, in our Akan culture. The animal totem for that particular clan is the vulture. So, it may be that. Depending on who you are, what group you come from, you will find out. You can find out from your Nsamanfo, as well as from your Kra, if this is an Achinebois or animal totem connected with your Kra, if it's connected with one of your patrilineal or matrilineal clans, and what the nature and function of that force is. So you go to your Okraa for these various questions, as well as your Nsamafo. They will guide you towards answers to the information. They will give you information, but then they will also guide you towards physical evidence of the information that they gave you spiritually. It's no different than communicating with your grandparents, because that's exactly what you're doing. Great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, some of whom are very knowledgeable in spirituality and medicine and nation building, warfare, all areas of human endeavor. We have ancestresses and ancestors who mastered that. Those are the NANASOM and Samafo. They have guidance on every aspect of life activity based on experience, specifically the experience of your people in your specific clan and the nuanced manner in which we had to approach certain things where other clans may approach them in different ways because of our physical and spiritual anatomy. So you go to your Nsamafo to find out specific things, and they will give you, direct you towards resources that can confirm what they gave you spiritually. Okay, so it's 9:30. We're gonna stop it right here. If you have any questions, hit us up on aquamumine@odwirafo.com or Afurakai.ning.com. If anybody wants to make a chede, you can make the donation to support our efforts. We're giving out all of the books that we have on our website. It's about 12 books. We have about 40 articles. We have audio webcasts, about 9.5 hours of that. We have a number of videos, it would be 23, and it's over 40 hours of information going into detail about these subjects. And of course, all of the books, all of the articles, everything that we produce, all those publications are all free. The physical hard, soft cover publications we would have to sell, like the Okra complex. Of course, we have to sell the hard, soft cover, but the PDF versions are free for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit to download immediately anywhere we find ourselves in the world, so we can get this information. So if you want to make a donation towards our efforts to continue to publish and get this information out to our people, you can go to the Achede page or the donation page, or the donation button, Achede button, on the nhoma page with this particular text. And we'd like to say, may I say thank you for that. And may I say I'm glad that the information has been helpful for you. Sister, I see you just popped up. So we're going to end it right here, but just email us. Go to Afurakai.ning.com. You can join that site if you haven't joined already. And we also are Afurakai on Facebook, and we have a Facebook group, Akanfo NANASOM. So Medase, and we will be posting, the next event coming up in the next within about the next week. Most likely it would be next Kwesi next Sunday, or Benada, but we will be sending that information out. So just keep up with us. Okay, Medase.